Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson,
And I'm Matt Lilly.
and we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started.
So on today's show, Douglas Bentley with Sacred Wisdom School, a good friend of mine, known a long time. Super excited to get into this conversation today. So let's get to the conversation with Douglas Bentley. Douglas Bentley, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me.
We're so excited to have you on. You know, you and I have been friends for, I don't know, more than a decade. I think maybe a decade and a half or almost going on two. I don't know, a while. We've known each other a long time and through a lot of transitions. So I was excited to have you come on today. And you have a school called Sacred Wisdom. And so tell us a little bit about that. What's the school about?
Well, I think for me, I think I'm a very ordinary person. So I'm from Washington, D.C., and just sort of a standard American life in a lot of ways. And I think one thing that always struck me since early childhood, I think maybe around like 11 or 12 onwards, I suddenly realized I'm just really unhappy as a human being. And I couldn't understand, I didn't have the understanding that other people were feeling the same way. So I didn't understand why either. I just remember feeling, boy, I feel a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear and a lot of hurt. I really didn't like myself. And there's a lot of pain inside, a lot of anger, but I was conditioned in such a way that we'd never show anger, nor would we ever cry. So it was just sort of bottled up inside. And it just, unfortunately for me, was stuck like a sore, raw nerve throughout my life. And at a certain point, I started learning about meditation, like in my early 20s. And it wasn't that meditation was at all helpful, because the only thing I meditated, the only thing that was there was pain. And the people teach me meditation, they seem to be without it, as I perceive. And that actually ended up leading me to just going to live in India and actually sitting down for 10 years and saying, I got to figure this out. Like, I was successful at an early age. I was one of these dot-com kids, straight out of high school to a corporate job doing website stuff. And, bought my first townhouse at 20 years old and things like that. So I had all the comforts of life at such an early age. And it only brought more misery, because you have the new car, you have your own house, you have everything, you're settled at such a young age. And all of a sudden you come home every night and the only thing that's there inside of you, no matter who your relationship with is just pain or fear, insecurity, and discontent. So it led me to live in India, and I had the opportunity to study from a great teacher. And the only thing that teacher did in a really beautiful way was say, it's inside of you. You got to go inside and face it. And it took a long time to hear that. And at a certain point, I finally started doing my work of facing what was there, asking to be experienced, asking to be felt. And it wasn't easy. Like, there was nothing nice about it. But something miraculous happened when I actually allowed myself to finally stop, slow down, and confront the pain of my life. It actually healed. And layer after layer, day after day, month after month, and year after year, I started becoming whole and complete again. I started feeling love in my heart and feeling once again connected to life, being able to actually abide or live in my heart throughout the day. And at a certain point, my teacher saw that and said, please go home and share what you learned in your own way, in your own shoes, and take care. So about 3.5 years ago, we came home, my wife and I, who I also met in India, and we started Sacred Wisdom School. And we saw it as a place to just invite people on their own journeys to say, hey, look, here's some things that are helping us. This is us common people, normal people. And this is what's working in our journey of self-healing. We'll share it with you, and you discover if it works for you or not, because we respect you're on your own journey. And our school has been growing really beautifully. It's been a real beautiful body of work, because it's been a place of honoring everybody in their own paths, respecting wherever anyone's at, and just as a friend, sharing what was working for us or what not working for us. And so Sacred Wisdom School is a really beautiful place, and it's been a great work so far.
And so kind of So one, I don't know. You keep saying that you're normal. I'm like, no, you're not. Nobody. You're you went to India for 10 years. That's not typically what Americans do. I'm just saying. I've been there a couple times. You know that. I didn't stay for 10 years, so that's not normal. But in a good way, it's not normal, right? I think it sounds like you asked some very serious questions of yourself at a very young age that led you to want to discover more, I guess, or even just alleviate your own pain or your own suffering. So I think that's kind of a very unique and a positive way thing that you did to kind of as a I think that makes you one. I know you're extremely relatable just because you and I are friends and we talk off and on and have known each other for a long time. And I've always just appreciated that you are very grounded in your human beingness. Sometimes with spiritual teachers or spiritual guides or what, there's like this sense that they're somehow better or know more or right. And I think I really love your approach because you're just so authentically you and transparent with even the struggles you have, in your everyday life now. I mean, you have some complexity. When we met, we were both single, we weren't married, and we had no kids. And we were playing like in the amateur leagues, right?
Exactly.
and now we've moved on to like the semi-pro. I don't know what the pro is for sure. Maybe we just keep adding.
10 kids plus is the pros,
Yeah, exactly. Our producer's in the room. Troy's got 5 or 6 kids. 5 kids, so he's like in the pro leagues. We're still in the semi-pro, right?
Just send me a photo of you. I'm gonna put it on the altar and worship it.
There you go. But I mean, share more about India and kind of as you said, and I think and Maria and I were talking pre-show that there's maybe a misconception that a monk just sits in an ashram somewhere or on a mountain somewhere and meditates. That's not really what happens. So kind of share with your experience of India or that 10 years you were there.
Yeah. Well, I think to clarify, there is unique things that happen to people. You could say it's a destiny where like a being will come in. Very true stories, a being will come in and literally at the age of 2 or 3, a monk will come down from the Himalayan mountains, ask the parents to take the kid because he's destined to be a monk, take him into a cave, and the monk will live its entire life out in the cave.
Wow.
And will be in a super state of consciousness, and probably live 150 years. So these are very, very destined things. And you can say these beings were built for total renunciation. It's not that there was like they're practicing renunciation. It was that they were in such a place in their journey, even when they took birth, that this was a very important stage. This life was an important moment for that, There's other things like myself, which is sort of like, for some reason, life just knows where the medicine is. And for me, life knew an alignment, maybe it was destiny, to go and be with this master for a period of my time. And that this master had what I was needing to heal. And the entire principles he showed me and taught me and ingrained in me are the very bedrock of how I perceive life now. He would always take the stance, all of life is one. It's a misconception. It's a delusional experience if you feel you are separate from the other. I remember thinking that was the most wildest thing. Yeah, intellectually, I'd be like, yeah, I get it. That's how the mind always gets it,
Right.
But it was only until many, many years later to where that became the experience. That's when I suddenly said, wow, like, thank God I was with this being, like, that's important. So being up with that teacher, we were helping run a school. So we all had our responsibilities. I think when I was there was 108 monks and I was the only Western person. And so we were busy running a place that was in service to people of all paths and faiths, etc. And they were all here to see this great teacher. I loved it, to be honest. It was phenomenal. And it was exactly what I needed. And strangely enough, at a certain point, I felt very completed with it. It was like my whole life suddenly said, that was perfect for you. Now an entirely new phase of your life opens up. And looking back of getting married and living here in USA again, and having 2 children, 2 dogs, having the exact opposite of what I had in India, I don't regret it one bit. I feel all of this happening in my life is exactly what's needed for my further growth in my own journey. It's like everything that was not able to be healed and set right or seen now in these circumstances boy is that the next level, you know?
Yes.
But thank God I didn't have children before I actually healed myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's something I'm really grateful for, because we were very consciously able to have the decision to have children and hold intentions for it, and consciously understand what's going on, be able to talk and reflect on how we're raising them or how we're acting unconsciously towards them. You know, there's
Mm-hmm.
moments that we all act out,
Mm-hmm.
and having a partner who can see it and say, let's look at that for a moment. You know, what's that doing?
Right.
I think it's phenomenal. So I think we're finally at 40 years old, and a decent enough place to actually raise kids, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see when they get older, right?
Right. Well,
We'll
yes.
see what they turn into. I have no idea.
We'll let their therapist tell us if you screwed them up or
Exactly.
not.
We're already putting a fund away for their therapies.
for the therapy, that's right. Mom and
College
Dad,
fund, there's therapy fund.
the therapy fund, that's right. I always call them my Parent of the Year award. Like anytime I've really screwed up, it's like, oh, good, I won the Dad of the Year award again. There we go.
Absolutely.
There's the trophy, right?
I always call this the 70s dad. So if I find myself like barking out or being
Right.
like super dominant, I
Right.
just like laugh and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm being the 70s
70s
dad.
dad.
Like, I always visualize it with a big mustache, you know, and
Yeah, it's different today raising kids than when we were kids. That's for sure. It's a lot.
huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or at least that's my perspective of it. But so, what kind of topics do you like in your school? What kind of topics do you typically address, or what do you talk about? I guess when we say school, help us understand what that means.
Yeah, totally. You know, I would say I make use of so many different topics that are appealing to people to help them in their lives, to lead them to one singular thing. And so, for instance, the course we have coming up is a course on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole stance on that is learning to actually allow the other to be the mirror of what's going on inside of you. So not saying how to change the other, how to make a better partnership with the other, but literally allowing the other to be as they are so you can face yourself at a deeper level. We have another course on engaging in life. You know, so many people who are part of spirituality are just sort of on the sidelines waiting for life to somehow happen for them. And people who are very much not into spirituality are tremendously successful, fully engaged in life. So we have courses on these things, and we have courses on so many facets of the human experience. But for each and every one of them, the only thing I'm actually truly concerned about is getting a person to learn to bring their attention into living a life inside the heart. And see, the whole problem I feel with the human condition is a person's completely sucked into and focused and tossing and turning the life of the mind. They're constantly fueling this huge unconscious swirl of thoughts. And they think if they keep thinking, they're going to think their way out of it. If they somehow learn more about anything, they're going to somehow evolve it. If they critique themselves enough with more thoughts, they're going to change it. But what if the solution was to just simply bring the focus of being consumed in the mind to where you're actually focused from the act of compulsively thinking to learning to feel each moment? So if your entire moment-to-moment experience is focused into feeling, all of a sudden this switches off. It reduces by almost 80, 90%. And when it reduces, when you're not fueling, not throwing fire onto the flame of it, you suddenly come to some larger conclusions about your own nature. If you're feeling each moment, which could be another way of saying beingness, you're suddenly present. If you're present and thoughts are not tossing and turning, but there's space and silence inside, how amazing to discover you may not be any of those thoughts. That thoughts may be happening based on the neurology of how the brain's configured, but no thought is actually you. How profound to suddenly realize I am some kind of awareness. I'm some kind of beingness. I'm some kind of space. It was just that all the energy of my body was pointed into the mind, and it was just reeling in chaos and fear. And I called that me. I was rehashing all these unresolved stories of the past. I was out of all the emotional discontent in me, I was constantly daydreaming and projecting how I'll find pleasure, peace, and happiness in the future. And there was no sense of the present moment. The present moment was just a springboard of the past haunting you and the future of somehow the peace and salvation of anything you're seeking for will be ahead. But at a certain moment, when you fall into the heart and you stop resisting, stop struggling, you start feeling and being, it collapses. And how fascinating is life if life doesn't have meaning to it? Not purpose, but the mind coding each experience with its own philosophy. What if each experience was silent? What if each experience was the senses were free from the wrapping dialogue? All of a sudden, you're present, you're feeling, you're experiencing, and you're being tremendously authentic. You're grounded in life. You're not escaping anything. And I think that's one of the largest things anybody can ever do in life is to realize there's nowhere to go. It's all right here. And you stop running from yourself inside. So you start actually developing emotional intelligence. You start saying, wow, fear is here, and that's okay. Wow, I'm hurt right now, and that is okay. Whatever's there, let me just take a moment and breathe and settle and allow myself to actually experience what is there. This is the life of the heart. When a person, moment by moment, is settled and accepting the experience at hand in the heart, they're in tune with themselves. So therefore, they're in tune with life. They'll be the greatest benefit in all relationships. They'll always be sort of at the right place in the right time because they're listening. The heart is sort of like the Wi-Fi hub of the present moment. It's attached to everything. It's sensing everything. It's giving you the intuition, the feeling. So when a person is just living in the heart, they're spontaneously responding to life. But when you're lost in the mind, you're not listening to that. You're disconnected from yourself. You're disconnected from life. And you're only living a life of assumptions. You're living a life of programmed conditioning. So you're reactive to life, all based on fear. So you're sort of a robot. But when a person is living in their heart, they're here, they're now, they're not resisting, and whatever's stuck inside starts coming up to be healed. And this is the great healing that takes place in a person. And believe it or not, as these layers lift off of you, what remains is love. The kind of love that's not based on who you love or why you love, but a natural, gentle state of feeling love. And this is the gift. This is the prize that waits for you when you live the life of the heart. What you were seeking for was this space. You don't care about enlightenment. You don't care about awakening. You don't care about any label. You just know, I found myself. I'm home. I found the love. I feel complete. I feel connected to everything. So my whole journey with Sacred Wisdom School, and I know my wife's the same, is all that matters is taking a person there, giving them all the confidence to stay there. And I use every kind of course, every kind of offering to give them the wisdom of that offering, but everything is rooted to a person living in the heart. I feel like I did my job if a person learns to truly live the life of the heart. And I'd have to say it's a major focus of the school.
Very interesting. And so, and you're always good at giving actual real world examples. Can you kind of walk us through, because, from my own experience, doing the work, if you want to call it that, or just doing work in this space, emotional intelligence, if you want to call it that, spirituality, whatever label you want to put on it, can come with a lot of discomfort or a lot of pain, because to your point, it's kind of like if I have a cut, right? Well, there's a certain point where that hurts when it heals, right? It's not just I cut and all of a sudden it heals and now I feel wonderful. There's that stuff that you keep saying coming up. That's usually doesn't feel that pleasant, right? That's why we pushed it down, because we didn't want to feel it. So I guess, can you kind of walk us through an example in your life of kind of how that showed up, and kind of so people can kind of get more of a tangible grasp on that?
Yeah. So I would have to say what you're discussing is the single hardest bit of learning or confidence that a person has to grasp in this journey of going into the heart. For me, day one, my teacher in India would be saying this, day one. But it took me 6 years and took crisis literally to make me finally say, I'm not moving away anymore. It took all of life compounding everything to me to where I finally said, there's nowhere to go. I have to step into this pain, you know? So I would say that in the spiritual journey, the first leg of the spiritual journey is a lot of fun. You change your name to some kind of unique Sanskrit name. You wear a bunch of malas, change your clothes. You know, you're namasteing everybody at the grocery store. It's pretty ungrounded, but you're talking to angels all the time. You got the answers to everything. You're pretty annoying, actually. You're the worst person to be around during Thanksgiving. So you got the answers for everything because you read about it.
Right.
Your teacher told you.
Right.
So I win the award of that. You know, I had that for a while, and then at a certain point, what happens for most people, but it's what happened to me too. You're tired of the carnival. You've had enough cotton candy. You're tired of all the roller coasters. You're done. You don't care what names you have or badges or merits you're given. You get a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. Then once you realize, like what I did, I woke up at a certain point as a monk, feeling so significant as a monk, feeling so amazed. I was the only Western person, how unique I was, all these things, you know. In my little ecosystem, I'd be spotted. Right. I needed a suntan.
I was gonna say, because you didn't have very good tan. I remember it was
not at all. I mean, it was just painful.
You know, 30 guys with a tan, and then and you were actually a little bit
nice and wonderful tans.
Yeah, and you got you were a little bit taller too. I don't know how anybody lives in India for 10 years and doesn't get any tan.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely. If I had to ever show those pictures, I would Photoshop a couple layers of shade on me. So, right. But I was left with this realization. And the realization was, I'm not enlightened. I'm not awakened. I've had different experiences, but they don't really mean anything because it doesn't matter to where I'm at right now based on what mystical experience I've had. And so I sat there and I realized the only thing I am is a guy who is managing his pain and suffering. That was the realization. I suddenly go, all these people think I'm some kind of awakened monk in some big state who has all this ability or something like that. But the truth of the matter is, if we're going to look at the truth, which is really important, I'm a guy with just nothing but pain inside. And I ran off I didn't come to India for some special reason. I escaped to India thinking it would all go back by faster. It'd be all taken away from me. So here was like this rock bottom space in my life where I just realized the gig is up for me. There's nothing more other than me being with pain, and it was the truth. And so what I learned to do, which is sort of a very core thing that we always teach at our school, is I just remember it was like one morning I was all by myself. And I just sat up in my bed and I started breathing really deep and really slow, like very consciously. And I started breathing right into all the pain. And I kept doing it. I mean, I did it for probably like 45 minutes, maybe an hour, just breathing in. And every exhalation, I started softening my heart and my whole body so I could feel the pain more, not to escape anything. I completely was melting into this absolute ball of hurt inside. It's not that that all went away in that moment, but all of a sudden I was watching as I was doing that, how I was nothing but all of my life running from this, even in the 6 years up to that moment, running from it. And I started literally doing it deeper and deeper, and I could feel little pops, little burning sensations. I felt releasing happening. I started crying very profoundly. And it was like, oh my God, like I just healed the layer of myself. And it wasn't all done. It was just like a layer came up, and this is what it took to do it. Mm-hmm. So I suddenly said, I'm going to start doing this all the time. So I started making space for myself the best I could, where I would just absolutely go into and see how deeply can I feel the burn? How much can I walk into that fire and relax into it and allow my nervous system to actually feel? And I learned that you have to breathe. You have to consciously breathe. It's the only thing that slows the mind down enough. If you lose your conscious breath, you start drifting off. So that would have to say was a major moment that defined my spiritual growth. Was this moment where I was so tired of running, I collapsed. And amongst the collapse, I came to the truth, which is I'm nothing but a sorrow management king. And I wanted to actually just finally say, I'm going to heal and sit up and actually process and heal. And that led to me suddenly making a point that I'm not going to run anymore. And that was a very step by step, day after that, I stopped running. And I'm telling you, healing's not fun. The strongest fears will come up. And sometimes you can't stay with it. But even when I couldn't stay with it, I'd give myself a break, and then I'd stay with it further after that. Sometimes so much pain is there that all you can do is eat ice cream and watch Netflix until you pass out,
Right.
Sometimes that happens.
Right.
But the next morning, I would be right back into healing again. And so I just kept staying true to that process, and it completely transformed my life.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you've got a question for Doug, feel free to. Anything you want to ask Doug?
Nope, I don't have a question.
You don't have
I've
a
just
question?
been listening.
So, how do you typically conduct your school then? How's that? How do you deliver it? Kind of give us some of the specifics of that.
Well, we personally love physical retreats. We did one in Costa Rica like 2 years ago in the rainforest. It was phenomenal. We plan to go back into physical retreats. It's just that, like the rest of the world,
Yep.
online was safer. So
Right.
we developed these 6-week programs that are 2 sessions a week. They're like an hour and a half each, and we have like a group on like a Telegram app that we actually touch base with on a daily basis to connect. And the entire purpose or the entire framework of all of our courses is a very spontaneous kind of teaching. We don't necessarily believe to show up with some kind of large structure. We know exactly where we want to take people, and we know exactly kind of the overall arc of the course. But when we show up, we really want it to be something that the heart speaks very spontaneously. And so we found when we do it that way, when we allow it to be a spontaneous kind of atmosphere, we find it's always really in resonance and alignment with where people are actually at, as opposed to walking in with some kind of rigid structure. So plus we've both been doing this for so long that it's just it actually flows better for us to just teach more spontaneously. It's just something we prefer. And the cool thing I say about our school is something that I've actually always wanted to do, and that's that we created a model in our school called heart-based reciprocation. It's always been my dream that I wanted to build a spiritual school that's accessible to any human being across the planet, that nothing should get in their way. Maybe the language thing, that they can get to translate or something like that, but money's never a factor. So our entire school is based on the idea that you go through the whole course, and at the very end, you reflect on what this was worth to you. And from your heart, you make a course payment based on what you feel it was worth with what you can actually afford. And so we have people in all different countries who attend the courses. Some people can only afford 50 cents or $1. There's other people who are very well off and they can afford much more, and they support the school that way. And I found that actually brings me tremendous joy, because it allows no boundary per se for us to give our offering and to give it without the distinction of payment. And it's very beautiful. I think the Vipassana meditation system does something very similar to this. And it's something that they found tremendous success in it. And so we do it ourselves, and it makes me feel very nice to invite anybody, because I don't feel like I'm trying to sell anything. I can simply say, this could be helpful for you if I feel it is, if I feel it could be. And you can pay whatever you felt was worth to you at the end. And I think that's really neat, and it makes it a lot of freedom and fun in our school to do that way.
Right. That's very cool. That's a totally different model than I've typically heard of for courses. So I really like that. What do you think in the world right now? What are you sensing, and then what do you think needs to happen from an individual standpoint? Kind of what do you think's happening in the world, and then what would you say we could do to? Well, we'll start there. What do you think's happening in the world right now? Because it feels pretty weird to me.
Yeah, it totally does. I actually have a very optimistic view. I have found myself that, and I've seen it in so many others, that when a person heals, they get more in touch with their heart, they're more in alignment with themselves and life, their own truth each moment, what they feel like, and they're following that. I find those people tend to actually be in the flow of life. Health is always waiting for them, auspiciousness. Life seems to be very sacred. They naturally seem to be very giving, caring, very sensitive, and abundance naturally finds them, even miraculously. Somebody who's not even able to work, suddenly somebody just gives them some money. So when a person lives the life of the heart, when their heart's restored to love, or at least a state of peace with what's there, you could say that they're back into allowing life to take care of them. When a person's filled with a lot of pain and they live the life of the overactive mind, they're not listening. So they're actually very reactive to life, and they can't see that life is constantly trying to take care of them. So many bad decisions are taking place, and they're always acting from a very defensive place. So they're not in a space where they can actually really be of help to others, or they're too blind to see the other has a need as well. Whatever it could be at any given moment. They're blinded to it. So what I actually see is happening is, I actually see that humanity is actually taking this leap right now into the heart. If you can see, even by this last decade and the decade before and the decade before, such massive reform is happening on how we relate to individuals, how we relate to societies, how we relate to gender and sexuality and race. So many things are actually coming to light right now, and great acceptance and balance is taking place. So I actually think that humanity is taking a massive leap in evolution right now. And I think that it's a very, very beautiful thing. But as anything grows, the old must shed. And I actually think we're in the very actual years, next year, the year after, of actually watching large shedding happen. And it seems so scary and destructive. But I tell you, we have all the intelligence, all the infrastructure, and Mother Earth is still there to sustain us for this new thing that's going to emerge. Who knows what it's going to look like? No one knows. It's not going to be so radically different. But I believe we're going to be moving as a species to a tremendously holistic state. I think we're going to see it in our lifetimes. I think we're going to watch everything that's not holistic, everything that's not sustainable, naturally die its death. And it won't be necessarily, not necessarily have to be so dramatic, but they just naturally fade off, like plastic straws. How many new solutions for plastic straws? I don't know if anyone should invest stock in the plastic straw company, Right. They're out of here. So like the iPod destroyed the CDs, like you had CDs. Once you had an iPod, you just immediately threw them all in the trash,
Right.
So I think you're going to be witnessing this at an exponential level in these upcoming years. And I think the world we're going to see in 10 years from now and 20 years from now is going to be vastly, vastly different than the world we can see right now. And I think a lot of the old paradigms that are very scary, how divisive and how unsustainable they are, won't really be a part of what we'll see in 20 years from now. So I found that the way to smoothly be a part of this transition is that a person must learn to work on themselves. They have to heal themselves. A person has to take the stance of responsibility for self-healing. Because when a person finally says, if pain arises inside of me, I take responsibility that it's my pain to heal. It's not pain given by the other. It is something that life is triggering. It's for me to heal. The person could step into that simple act. They don't have to be spiritual or anything. They can step into learning to allow themselves to finally feel and face and heal the pain inside as it arises whenever. That person's going to naturally flower into their heart. Nothing else is needed. They're going to naturally be guided by their heart, live the life of the heart, and be of great service very spontaneously to the rest of life. And I think people who resist this in this upcoming decades are just because of the amount of people who are shifting into that, the amount of sort of energy on the planet, the vibrations changing. I think people will struggle tremendously. So if a person just kind of catches on to this and learns to live their life with their vision inside, learning to pay attention to what's happening each moment inside and not resist it, they will undergo a huge transformation very naturally. And I think the world's going to be actually quite fine. I just think that we get to be the generation to watch uh, an age of tremendous divisiveness to an age where humanity feels completely connected and responsible for taking care of the planet. And I think we're watching this now happen, you know?
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And I've often thought over the last, especially the last 2 years, that, if I just ask myself, why is all this stuff coming up on social media? Why, the vaccines, not vaccines, race, relations and issues around that. I mean, it's almost like politics, right? It's almost like everything is super divided. Like you're either, way for or way against whatever the topic is, right? There's like and in that I've started to find like it actually helps me clarify what I actually truly believe, what I truly feel, but it gets me in touch with an actual feeling. So it's like when the George Floyd thing, that's actually pre-COVID. 2 or 3 years back, and it actually just allowed me to say, okay, what do I actually feel about this? What do I actually feel? And then what's my experience of racism, which was very limited. And so I got to lean into that. I got some friends together. We sat down, we had a conversation. I said, I feel ignorant about this whole thing. I mean, I don't understand. Either side, kind of what's happening. And so for me, it gave me great clarity. And without events like that happening, I wouldn't have sought that clarity. And so I've been trying to myself just lean into what am I actually feeling? What do I actually believe? What do I actually looking for out of this interaction? Or what's my experience of it? Because if I'm having conflict inside, then I'm having conflict inside, right? And that conflict, that this external thing, to your point, you mentioned a mirror earlier, but this is just giving me lots of opportunity to see what's actually happening or what has happened and still stuck, I guess, is the way I kind of look at it. Yeah. To be brought up, to be healed. And without that catalyst, I just stay broke, kind of in the state I'm in, which is maybe not the greatest state at some juncture. So I do agree that I think, well, I guess that's my perspective of what's happening, is it's giving us the opportunity to make choices and to see it's giving us the opportunity to heal things that maybe are under the surface that we haven't addressed or we've been running from, is kind of my experience of that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's yeah, go ahead. I
found that as I watched how the individual journey is inside myself of naturally, it's like when the process of paying attention inside starts and you kind of get the hang of it, it sort of never stops because it's hard not to look in that direction.
Right.
And so it's sort of an automatic process at a certain point. You're just watching the process happen, and the greater surrender to it, the more fast it actually goes. And so as I see that the individual process goes of the great cleansing out of my unconscious and the great healing of the wounds that were stuck inside of me since childhood, when I started seeing that, I realized that is happening on the collective level.
Right.
The collective level is people are starting to get in touch with themselves. People are starting to be in a place of inquiry and philosophy. They're just starting to say, who am I? Why am I?
Right.
What is this? What do I feel about this? And because that's happening on a collective level, it's like awesome. So now we're going to watch a collective awakening taking place. And it's going to be a very spontaneous and very, very fast process in the big picture of things.
Right.
So that's why for me, I love looking at things in a very large picture, because when you look at things in a very large picture, you see very patternated shape, and so you can see, I see this is happening. Look how fast it's happening. This is happening twice as fast now. It's happening 4 times faster now. So you're watching generation after generation. It's almost like how the iPhone is. Each generation of the iPhone, there's a significant leap. And we're watching like my great grandfather, his belief system, how rigid it was, Then my grandfather, World War II, how that was. Suddenly my dad, who wanted to be different than my grandfather, still from the 70s though, got the mustache. Then all of a sudden comes me, how completely different I perceive things, and I'm raising a child.
Right.
I know my child's gonna be quite different altogether.
Yeah. Right.
And imagine what that's gonna be like, So that's what we're witnessing. There was this cool thing I saw that gave me a lot of made me feel very nice. there's this patch of garbage that's in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
It's something massive. It's you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. That's like larger than the state of Texas. It's the
You got it.
where all the plastics they call it something, the ocean dump or there's some name for it, but yes, but basically it's this, somehow the tides and the oceans all have swirled this thing to, basically it's like, where it's kind of has it's the ocean trash dump basically, right?
You got it. And so here's this millennial guy, this young man.
I saw that the other day.
Yep. He literally said, how do you clean it up? And he sat there for several years inventing his own unique system of fishnets. He tested it. It worked. And literally as it worked, as he inaugurated it working, he said, pack your bags. We're now literally getting on the boats and going to clean this whole thing up. This is like, you would think the governments would would see that and immediately say, clean it up.
Right.
No, it takes this young man to do it. And I believe that is exactly what we're going to be seeing millions more of. We're going to be seeing these beings emerge out of nowhere. Like I always thought it would be our government to colonize Mars, to colonize Moon. No, it takes this man from South Africa to pop onto the scenes and say, the world needs electric cars, the world needs to live on Mars, the world needs tunnels underground to shoot us across the country. And you're sitting there going like, why didn't our government build this 20 years ago, 30 years ago? And so this is what we're witnessing, we're witnessing the rise of extraordinary beings. And I think it's the sign of the times. I think we're going to see them coming crawling out of the woodwork. And we have so much infrastructure on the planet that everything's in place to make those things a reality. It just took a different state of consciousness. And we're witnessing that consciousness now emerge in the younger generation.
Well, and I totally agree and resonate with that. We've had different guests on the show, over the last year that we've been on the Next Level podcast, and then of course Richard with Dose of Leadership. But I guess what I'm noticing in that is that it's up to us as individuals, right? Just like you talked about with the young man, it's not, the old paradigm is we do rely on the government and the FDA is supposed to do what they're supposed to do, and the CDC is supposed to, all these agencies are supposed to keep us safe and kind of tell us what to do. And now it's shifting to kind of what we call self-authorship, but really, how am I going to be a part of the solution, and whatever level that is, whether that's just being a better parent, a better brother, sister, coworker, whatever, to literally cleaning up the ocean. And it's like, if you're going to wait on the government or something outside of you to fix the world, that's not going to happen, right? It's not. If you want to fulfill your destiny, if you want to fulfill your purpose, you got to lean into whatever that gift is you have and give it to the world. Versus waiting for, the Democrats or the Republicans or the independents. I'm to the point of like saying, I don't think anything that exists currently can really fix much of anything, because it's so institutionalized and ingrained in whatever it is, whether it's, our the way we elect people to, the way business runs. Almost all of it needs a revamp, and that only happens from pioneers or people that are thinking differently. In fact, I'm kind of like you with that young man story. I'm always just impressed by the way it seems like, with Bitcoin and blockchain technology, all this. I'm just like, my mind can't quite catch up with all that stuff yet. But I'm just I'm so inspired that people can just, if nothing else, are so creative, right? And can just think differently. I'm like, wow, because I'm kind of that bridge between, the 70s and today, right? I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and, early 90s. And so, I certainly see the world through those colored lenses, but I also am very encouraged and enthusiastic about, gosh, what could be, right? Or what can be, because it's like, that's the thing I've also noticed is anything I thought of like 10 years ago was like, man, that would be, I remember thinking even further back than that, probably, 30 years ago. It was like, I remember walking with a friend of mine. We were just thinking, what would be the craziest thing that we could think of that would, make sense and people would like, and we were thinking, wouldn't it be cool if literally you wouldn't have to go to the video store to get a video? Like back then it was tapes, right? Videotape. It was like, wouldn't it be so cool if you could just like sit in your house and there was like, just like your remote control, you could do something, the movies would just be there and you could just rent them literally in your house. And then, here we are now. That took about, 20 years, 25 years, but here we are, and it's exactly what we're experiencing. So it's almost like anything that you can even conceivably imagine is just happening in months versus decades. That's kind of what it seems like to me. It's like every time now we're getting groceries delivered to our house, right? So it's like 3 years ago, well, actually probably 5 years ago, that was like, wouldn't that be so cool? And then a couple of years later, right before COVID, it was like, oh, wow, there's all these services now that literally you don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. And it's just like, so it's just, as a entrepreneur and kind of a creative thinker, it's just like, gosh, if I wrote down 10 things I would think what would be really cool, and wrote those 10 things down, and probably in the next 12 months, those things are going to exist in some form, right? So it's kind of like, okay, what do I want to experience? Because if it's just evolving so fast. So you got me feeling positive. Thank you. I was feeling a little negative. Now I'm feeling a little bit positive about the future, Doug. Thank you for that.
I think one of the most important things, I'd have to say, if you ask what's the largest milestone, at least in my experience of the internal journey, it's actually learning to face fear. It's hardcore. It may sound like somehow superficial, like, oh, it's nothing, I got that, But when you look at almost all your actions throughout the day, and you look at all of your philosophy, your opinion about life, your stance towards this, your stance towards that. How do you feel about vaccinated, unvaccinated? How do you feel about this or feel about that? You can boil all of those perceptions down to the mind's fear of survival, because it needs to have some kind of large perception, because it's literally running from its internal fear. Now, the joke of the matter is it's only the mind unconsciously creating the fear in the first place.
Right.
So the mind creates the fear because you're living inside of it. The way the mind works, it's creating a sense of fear. No, it doesn't want us to survive. So then you launch all your activities throughout your day, all your measurement and relationships, all sorts of things, all stem from you managing this fear. And this idea is that you don't want to look towards it because a fear means somehow death. But what's so profound is at a certain point you realize, I'm doing nothing but managing the fear inside. And I love that movie, that scene in The Matrix with Neo, where they're like, don't fight the agent, he'll kill you. And they're at this train station at the end. And they all start running up the stairs. And Neo actually stops, and he turns around and says, I'm not going to run. And that, I think, was very symbolic of exactly what happens in the spiritual journey, where you actually start saying, I'm going to hold space for this fear. Like, I'm terrified about life. I'm terrified about the unknown. I'm terrified about the stock market, the highest it's ever been in all recorded history, trillions of times more. And that looks like it's going to go right in the opposite direction at any given moment. I'm terrified of the whole infrastructure. But then you actually say, what would it mean if I actually faced all of that fear on the emotional level? What if I got in touch with how that fear feels? Then all of a sudden, you suddenly start going inwards and feeling fear. And something really amazing happens. The fear expresses itself, and underneath all that fear, there's some subtle hurts and pains, or some very large ones. They come up and they get processed. And guess what happens? You're suddenly no longer gripped by any fear. I wouldn't say it's all the fear of your life, but I would say what was haunting you, the concern about life, the concern about economy, the concern about the kids, the concern about this. As fear comes up, if one can just face it and hold space for it, not to battle it, but to embrace, to breathe, to feel, to let it process through, it actually fades off. When that fades off, so does that perception or that story. So does that concept about the certainty the mind has about how it sees things in a certain light. The whole world's going to come to an end. This is going to happen. I'm concerned about that. I don't know how I'm going to pay money this year. All of these things start fading off. You start going into a place where the only thing you're concerned about, and the only thing that is of reality to you, is the vastness of your own being. You're just silent, present, and just completely here and now. You're just, you can't daydream about anything. What's so strange about that is when a person's not gripped by a fear, They're no longer blocking life for bringing that which they need. So the person who's saying the world's coming to end, they're going to lose all their money, all that fear is actually pulling that experience to them. They'll literally work themselves to that reality. But the person who has that striking fear faces it, the fear is no longer there. All of a sudden, their whole focus isn't, I'm going to lose my money. Their whole focus is, suddenly their whole heart is saying, how do I make more money? All of a sudden, more abundance comes. So the greatest thing that we can give life and society, in our relationships, is when the striking anxieties and fears come, we have to actually hold space for them. We have to know this fear is only coming from the mind. It's not reality at all, but it is asking to be felt and experienced fully. I'm going to hold space. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to allow myself to feel it, and I'm going to acknowledge it as it works itself out of me. As soon as I started doing that, I started getting over all the barriers in my unconscious, all the bad programming in my unconscious that was hindering the life that I wanted to live. So I actually feel that even though life could go through a massive dip, even though a huge transformation could take place, even though a great age of uncertainty is here, when I'm not in fear, I'm no longer even bothered or perceiving that as a reality. I'm only finding myself more abundant, more joy, more success in whatever I want to do. It's like life is dancing with me amongst all things that are happening. And so that's something that I would recommend. It may seem very strange to do, but no matter what happens at a certain point in someone's growth, they're going to have to learn to heal the fear inside as it arises. And when a person does that, they truly become empowered in their life, if that makes sense. They aren't affected in so many ways that they perceive they were in the state of fear.
Beautiful stuff, Doug. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. That was, I think, for myself and the listeners, just go back and replay that about 10 times until that makes sense, until that becomes an experience of life, right? So, again, thank you for coming on the podcast today. For those who want to get more of Doug, which I think we all can use more of Doug, go to the sacredwisdom.school. Is that the best way, or are there other channels to get a hold of you?
www.sacredwisdom.school. That will take you there.
And then you've got courses literally coming up every 6 to 8 weeks. You've got a new course on them, and they are focused on specific things in your life, specific areas of your life, right? Throughout the year.
We're currently on our program. We have 6 courses that we run throughout the year. They're 6 weeks long. We take a 2-week break. We start the next 6 week long, and each one's on a different facet. So one's on manifesting the things you want in your life. One's on relationships. One's on emotional healing. One's on the actual process of spiritual awakening. So there's each of them in this way, but there's a very common thread, as we spoke, that all of them are aimed towards you living your life in your heart, becoming very empowered and grounded in yourself.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for coming on today, my friend. I really appreciate spending the time with you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for doing the work and sharing what your experience and what you've learned and the teachings in the world. And I know we'll see more of you, and please come back on the show. We'd love to have you come on the show as you've developed new things and evolve the school. We'd love to talk about that, and maybe write a book so we can talk about your book, right? We love to talk about books. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Douglas, for coming on the show, and we look forward to seeing you more.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
So we had Douglas Bentley on the show today. It was a wonderful conversation. Maria, kind of what was your takeaway for the day?
My takeaway was just the focus on what we are all running from, emotion, and what we're scared of, and really feeling the emotion. I know me personally, I've been working, and he talked a little bit about a breath practice that he does, but I do clarity breath work, and that brings up all sort of emotion that we're scared of facing, and we're all managing our fear.
Yeah. Fear managers, as I think he called that, or something along those lines. Yeah. But no, I thought it was a wonderful conversation. I'm sure we'll have Douglas back on, just because it's, he's such a, I just love listening to Doug, talking to Doug, because he's just so grounded in his knowledge, but then also really can look and say, okay, what am I really running from? And he gave some examples today, obviously, as we heard in the podcast. So really, always a pleasure to have him on, and look forward to having him on again.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Next Level Method podcast. If you found some value in this, tell somebody about the show. Tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your kids, let them know all about Next Level Method. And Go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn more and join our community. Thanks for tuning in.